Dear students of grade 10th, welcoming you all to the social science class. Today we shall be learning economics portion, chapter 2, that is sectors of Indian economy. Now, these are some of the topics that you'll be learning from this chapter. Let us look at these pictures. You will see that people are engaged in various economic activities. Some of these are activities producing goods, some other are producing services. All these activities are happening all around us every minute and every day. So today we shall be learning how do we understand these activities, and one way of doing this is to group them or classify them using some criterion. Sectors of economic activities. Now let us first learn what is economic activities. Those activities which are conducted with the objective to earn money are called economic activities. Some of these activities produce goods or some other they produce services. Economic activities they can be classified in three different ways. The first is primary sector, secondary sector, and tertiary sector. Second, organized and unorganized sector. And third, public and private sector. So students, we shall be learning all these classification of economic activities in this chapter. Let us learn the meaning of primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. Now, when we produce goods by exploiting natural resources, it is an activity of primary sector. Now, this sector is directly associated with nature. For example, agriculture, forestry, fishing, mining, and extraction of oil and gases, all these activities involve natural resources. So ultimately, they comes under primary sector. Similarly, in the case of dairy or dairy production, these are dependent on the biological process of animals and availability of fooders. So all this also comes under primary sector. So dairy production is also comes under primary sector. The second is secondary sector. Now, secondary sector covers those activities in which natural products are changed into other form through a ways of manufacturing, which is associated with the industrial activity. Now, this secondary sector is also called an industrial sector. Examples like manufacturing and construction work, this all comes under secondary sector. The third is tertiary sector. Now, tertiary sector, these are those sectors in which activities help in the development of primary and secondary sector. Now, these in tertiary sector, their activities do not produce goods, but they provide services that support the production process. For example, transport, storage, communication, banking, they all comes under tertiary sector. This tertiary sector is also known as service sector. It also includes some essential services which provided by the professionals like doctors, lawyer, teacher, barbers. All this comes under tertiary sector. The various production activities in the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors produce a very large number of goods and services. Also, these three sectors have a large number of people working in them in order to produce these goods and services. We shall now compare these three sectors. The first is economic interdependence. All these three sectors are interlinked or interconnected. For example, cotton from cotton plant, which is a primary sector, is converted into textile in industries, that is secondary sector, and at the end it reached to the market through the means of transport, that is tertiary sector. So through this example, we can see that these three sectors are interconnected. The second is all these three sectors also produce final goods and services. They are directly consumed by the consumer and are not meant for further production or process. For example, by counting the value of biscuit, we will also get the value of flour from which the biscuit is made and the value of wheat from which the flour is made. Therefore, biscuit is the final goods and its value will only be counted to find the production level. The value of intermediate goods, that is the secondary goods, that is flour and wheat, are not counted. The third is gross domestic product. The gross domestic product implies the sum of all the value of final goods and services produced in all the three sectors in particular year is called GDP. It shows the total production of the country. So these sectors, when we compare these three sectors, we can see that they are economic interdependence. They produce final goods and services, and all these goods and services produced by all these three sectors are counted in the gross domestic product. We will be now looking on some of the historical changes in these sectors. The developed countries have gone through a historical changes in the economic sector as the economic activities had gradually shifted from primary sector to secondary sector to tertiary sector. Now, service sector has become one of the most important sector. The shifting of economic activities does not mean a complete elimination of the previous sector, but the importance and dominance of the next sector is increased. During 1950s to 1960s, Indian economy was dependent on agricultural and related activities. However, now between 1973 and 2003, all the production in all the three sector has increased substantially, but most importantly in tertiary sector, that is services sector. Over the 40 years, that is between 1973 to 2014, while the production in all the three sectors has increased, it has increased the most in the tertiary sector. As a result, in the year 2013 to 14, the tertiary sector has emerged as the largest producing sector in India, replacing the primary sector. We shall now be learning why is the tertiary sector becoming so important in India, that is rising importance of tertiary sector. Firstly, in any country, several services such as hospitals, educational institution, post, telegraph, police station, village administrative offices, defense, banks, insurance, all these are required, and these are considered as a basic services. And in developing country, the government has to take a responsibility for the provision of these services. Secondly, the development of the agriculture and industry lead to the development of services. Greater the development in these sectors as induces the demand for service sector like transport, trade, storage, etc. Third, as income level rises, better quality life and better standard of living for the people also increases. At this time, the demand of many more services like tourism, shopping, private hospitals, eating out places, restaurants, professional training institutions, private hospitals, all these are a huge are in huge demand. So you can see that this change quite sharply in cities, especially in big cities. Another reason for the rising importance in tertiary is also due to globalization. Due to this globalization, new services such as information and communication technology have also become an important and essential needs. So the production of these services has also been rapidly increasing. Over the years, you have seen that there has been a changing importance of the sector in terms of employment. We shall now see some of the employment of people in different sectors. The share of the primary sector in GDP of the country was 74% between 1972 to 73 and 49% in 2012 to 13. The secondary and tertiary sector have not created enough jobs to enable a substantial number of people to migrate from agriculture to this sector. Many of the workmen in primary sector are underemployed or discussed unemployed. Now, discussed unemployed are those kind of underemployment which is hidden in contrast to someone who does not have a job and is clearly visible as unemployed. I'm sure you have already learned about discussed employment in your last class. So these are some of the employment of the people in different sectors. You have seen that even though there has been an improvement in the production process in all the three sectors, the employment of the people in these three different sectors did not improve much. So we shall now be looking some of the ways to create employment. So the first is technical and institutional measures. So technical facilities like irrigation, availability of hybrid seeds like HYV seeds, awareness about modern techniques of agriculture, increase the productivity of arable land and increase the requirement of human force in agriculture. Institutional support like market, transportation, storage facilities, and other processing unit in the nearby urban areas will also increase employment of farmers in other sector. The next is promotion of allied agriculture. There has been a need to diversify the agriculture as more than 60% of the people are employed in agriculture sector. Farmers should be encouraged to adopt and allied agriculture activities like pisciculture, which is a fish farming, horticulture, that is growing fruits and vegetables, animal rearing for milk, and other products like beekeeping for honey, and many other cultivation of crops. So all this can be encouraged in order to promote more employment. This third one is focus on small scale industries and bank credit. Most of the farmers are dependent on informal sources of credit like relatives and friends, traders, money lenders, who charge a very high rate of interest. So, setting up a commercial bank to provide a loans to the farmer at a cheaper rate will also help them. Also, by promoting cottage and small industries in rural and semi-rural area, it can also generate employment for a large number of people. For example, setting up of a rice mill can also make some farmers to work in those mills. Fourth is improvement in rural infrastructure. Rural areas such as they lack basic facilities like road transport, banking, warehouse, markets. So government should invest more in developing this connectivity between the village and the market. In this way, they will provide more productive employment to farmer. Another ways of creating employment is improvement in education, health, and tourism. To improve the health condition in the villages, additional jobs will be created. More schools have to be opened. It has to be observed that many regions could also be developed as a tourist place, which will generate more employment opportunities for people living there. The last point here is the government policies or government programs like Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. We shall now be learning in detail about this MGNREGA in the next slide. Students, we shall now be learning one of the most important programs contributed by the Indian government to improve or to generate employment, that is Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. We call it MGNREGA. So MGNREGA was first formulated as National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. This act was passed in the year 2015 and launched by the Prime Minister on 2nd February 2006 onwards. Later on, this act NREGA was changed into Mahatma Gandhi NREGA, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. The main features of these schemes are the first, it targeted the scheduled castes, SCs, scheduled tribes, STs, and women suffering from poverty in the rural area. Secondly, the scheme guarantees 100 days. Now, recently, they have amended to 150 days in drought hit area of wage employment in a year to every household of 625 districts of the country. Third, the Gram Panchayat or the municipals, after proper verification, they will register the household and issue a job card to them. Now, this act is also called as a right to work because if the government fails in its duty to provide employment, the government will give unemployment allowances to the people. Let us examine another way of classifying activities in the economy, that is organized sector and unorganized sector. Now, organized sector covers those enterprises or place of works where the terms of employment and employment are regular and people have assured work. Now, these organized sectors are registered by the government and have to follow its rules and regulation, which is framed under the Factories Act, Minimum Wage Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, etc. So this is called organized because it has some formal process and procedure. Workers in the organized sector also enjoy a security of employment. They are expected to work only a fixed number of hours. If they work more, they have to be paid overtime by the employers. They also get several other benefits from the employers like paid leave, payment during holidays, provident fund, etc. They also get medical benefits, and under some laws, the factory manager has to ensure facilities like drinking water and safe working environment. So all this comes under organized sector. In contrast to organized sector, unorganized sectors are those enterprises or places of work which are not registered with the government. This sector is characterized by small and scattered units which are outside the control of the government. In unorganized sector, the rules and regulations are not followed. Workers get a low wages and there is no provision for overtime payment, paid holidays or paid leave. Hawkers, repair workmen, domestic servants, uh, and many other they comes under unorganized sector in urban areas. In rural areas, landless agriculture laborers, small and marginal farmers, weavers, blacksmith, they all comes under this unorganized sector. So unemployment is not secure in this unorganized sector. People can be asked to leave their job without any reason. Another way of classifying economic activities into a sector could be on the basis of who owns the assets and who is responsible for the delivery of services, that is, on the basis of ownership. So the first is public sector. So in this sector, the government owns most of the assets and provides all services. Uh, this public sector is also called a state sector or the government sectors. Examples like Indian Railways, Post Office, um, Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited, all this comes under um, public sector. The second one is uh, private sector. Now, in private sector, ownership of assets and delivery of services lie in the hands of individual or private companies. For example, like Reliance Industries Limited, RIL, Tata Iron and Steel Company, all this comes under private sector. In India, public sector predominated in power generation, healthcare, education, which belong to infrastructure development. So all these were dominated by the public sector, that is, government take initiative in improving these areas. While in the private sector, they predominates in sectors like agriculture, trade, hotel, manufacturing of goods, and some other. So these are the two types of or two classification of economic activities, that is public sector and private sector. There are several things needed by the society as a whole which cannot be provided by the private sector. So, we shall be learning some of the role of the government sector to improve the economy. So, the first is developing infrastructure. This is done by developing means of transport, power, communication, heavy industries, building bridges, roads, and railways. So, this can be taken by the government sector or public sector. The second is developing backward regions. So this can be in the form of setting up of industries, making roads in the rural or backward region, which in turn also provide employment in backward areas. Third is encourage small-scale industries, and uh, private sector can also encourage uh, small scale or cottage industry. In this way they can generate employment. Fourth is support farmers in buying food grains and support poor people by supplying food grains at a low price. Fifth, provide healthcare facilities and education in backward and rural areas. And lastly, Government can also deal with the problem of malnutrition, high infant mortality rate, unsafe drinking water, and lack of housing, or so on and so forth. So these are some of the role that uh, public or the government sector can initiate. In conclusion, we have seen that in this chapter we have looked at the ways of classifying economic activities into some meaning groups. One way of doing this is to examine whether the activity is related to primary sector, secondary sector, or tertiary sector. For the last 30 years, the data in India shows that while goods and services produced in the tertiary sectors contribute the most in the gross domestic product, that is GDP, we have also seen what all can be done for increasing employment opportunities in the country. Another classification is to consider whether people are working in organized or unorganized sectors. Most people are working in unorganized sector and protection is necessary for them. We also look at the difference between private and the public activities and why is it important for the public activities to focus on certain areas. So students, that's it for this chapter. We shall be learning another topic in the next class. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you.